Welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today for this webinar where we'll be exploring a bunch of the AP music theory specific content in Auralia and Musician. So today we will be kind of having a broad kind of look at these materials within the programs, and hopefully there may be some ways that the programs could support your current program offerings, give your students that kind of immediate feedback they need to help guide their learning, and also hopefully save you a bunch of time grading particularly items like perhaps 4-part writing and some of those kind of quite laborious drill and exercise types. Okay, so just before we start, just jump in here. I am going to release just a quick poll, just because that will just guide a few of our discussions today. I'll just launch that now if you're happy to just pop some responses in there. They're largely just in relation to how you would potentially, how you approach teaching AP music theory, the kinds of resources you like to use, and particularly some of the areas that you find your students may struggle with or need additional assistance with. If you do have any questions during the webinar, please do pop them in the Q&A, and we'll have a bit of a look at that towards the end of the session. We will be recording the webinar also, and we can shoot out an email to the link with that. And if you do have any questions or you'd like to explore the programs further, I will pop a quick link in the chat now so that you can access that page on our website. Okay, so we will be covering a bit of ground today, but we're going to start with looking at some of the kind of the free response exam level type content, and then we'll work our way backwards from there and explore some of the more kind of foundational materials that can be used in the programs to just provide those kind of scaffolded levels for students as they're working through each unit as part of the CED. They can hopefully achieve mastery at each of those levels before they can then move on to the next item in the course. Okay, let's jump in now and have a look at some of this content. So I'm just in Chrome here in the browser, just at Auralia.cloud. We're kind of in the practice areas here at the moment, but to begin with, I'm actually going to jump across to tasks. And this is where you'll find lots of kind of more specifically curated quizzes and worksheets and kind of exam style tasks here that you can assign to your students. Now you can see here we have lots of items that are arranged by the various units in the AP Music Theory curriculum. You can, of course, also easily search. So we're just going to search for looking for free response questions here, and we're going to dive in straight away with some free response 1 and 2. Have a look at some of the melodic dictation question types. Okay, so I've selected this, and then I will choose start. Now you can see here I have a limit of 3 replays on this particular question. And you can see I'm given a few different entries here, and there are actually two questions per entry here. This obviously differs a little bit from the exam, but it's designed as a practice resource. So in this case, students will actually get feedback after they submit their answer as well. You can, of course, turn all that off if you want to replicate a true exam scenario and just have 2 questions, one for FR1, one for FR2. You can, of course, replicate that in here and turn off the feedback so the student doesn't receive that as they work through the materials. Okay, let's have a listen here. Okay, I will just click in a few items here and we'll just fill in these gaps. Hopefully your students will do much better than this. I will try and get a few things correct just so my scores, when we have a look at the kind of grading and reporting area later, doesn't reflect too badly upon me. So you can see here, we can of course replay that again. Okay, I'm going to submit this with some obvious errors and we'll see what Auralia comes back with here. All right, great. So straight away we can see where things went a little bit astray for me. And I can of course play back the correct answer again and also play back my answer for comparison. Okay, now let's move on to the next question. All right, so this time around we are in F sharp minor, and obviously we're in 6/8 this time. All right, excellent. So this question obviously mixes up a little bit of, natural minor and melodic minor kind of variations on the minor scale here in different sections. Once again, I'll just pop in a few notes here for the assessment. And let's just have a listen one more time. All right, just wanted to get a few extra things correct there. Okay, great. So now we can see here, once again, the correct answer versus our answer. And again, we can play them both back. As I mentioned here, this is a good example of where the melodic minor form of the scale is used in that latter part of the melody there. Okay, next up, let's move into the next section here. I should also mention that these worksheets are set up so that they're drawing from a question pool. So essentially, students can take this worksheet multiple times and get different sets of questions. All the melodic content that is in this worksheet also replicates the kind of content that you'll find in the AP Music Theory exam. So this means the rhythmic durations, the kinds of stepwise motion versus thirds or leaps replicates that, as well as the use of some chromaticism. So I think in the last 10 years it has always been, the raised fourth degree phi. So questions will, some of the questions will include that as well. So just so you're aware that that really replicates the kind of materials that students will see in the exam. Okay, here we are in the bass clef this time. So here's a good example of a melody where the raised scale degree 4 has been included. Okay, let's just pop in a few random goodies there for our last few pitches. Let's have one more listen. Okay, let's submit that regardless. And once again, we can see where things have gone astray for us, and we also see a partial credit we've been given for our attempt at this melodic dictation question. Okay, let's have a listen to one last one. And let's just get a couple of little things correct here. Whoops. And we'll just pop something in there. Okay, once again, you can see where things didn't quite go to plan for me in the little middle section here, but I didn't do too badly at the start and also at the end. So that's essentially the melodic dictation question formats. As I said, these really closely emulate the question types that students will see in the exam itself. Okay, 60%, not my finest work, but not too bad. Okay, so now back in tasks, we shall jump in here and I'm going to move on to some of the free response 3 and 4 questions. So in this case, there are a couple of options here. So you can do it in the context of the exam format, exactly where students are having to enter Roman numerals plus the soprano and bass. Or you can separate these questions out so that students are perhaps just having to do the harmonic dictation element, just having to enter Roman numerals independently of the voices, or just having to enter the soprano and bass voices without having to worry about the Roman numerals. So it just means students can break down those skills and really isolate and hopefully master them as part of the process. Okay, we will jump into harmonic dictation with the soprano and bass. Okay, so this time we are in C minor. Okay, so the bass line is something roughly like that. Let's have another little listen. All right, soprano is something along those lines, and now let's jump in and have a look at some of our figures. So you notice here on this particular question, we've actually expanded the chord palette out for ease of entry for the student. Okay, so again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but let's pretend this is something like this. Let's go for a 6. And then I think let's go for the cadential 6/4 and finish with a 1. Something along those lines. We obviously have a few extra replays to use up here if we need to. Okay, so we did a bit better this time, and you can see here that we actually did quite well with the soprano and bass parts. It was really just the Roman numerals that didn't quite go so well for me this time, although very close. And you can see I have been awarded partial credit for my attempt there as well. Okay, next up we might dive into free response number 6, the 4-part writing. And I'm going to start a new attempt at this one. And again, all the vocabulary, the length of the progressions, everything you will find in here replicates what students will see the sorts of questions students will see on the exam itself as well. Now we're in kind of test mode here at the moment, but when you're in practice mode, you can actually also enable this check my answer option, and you can allow as many checks as you want on these questions. This can be a great teaching resource for students, allowing them to, attempt some answers, get some feedback, edit their answer. So they're really getting that immediate feedback and hopefully really learning through this process. Okay, let's jump in here quite quickly. So I'm going to switch to voice 2 here to enter my bass part to begin with. And let's go with something like that. And then I'm just going to switch back over to voice 1 here to enter my soprano. And we might intentionally create a few different errors here, so you can see how some of these items work. Now you'll note here we do have the apply chord here, 565 of 4. So we could do some things here, like perhaps not resolve the 7th properly there, and let's do something like this. Now I'll just jump into the soprano voice here, and let's see. Now in here we can either resolve up to the A, or we can do a frustrated leading note down to the E if we want. Let's go with that. And finally, I'll just switch back over to voice 1 here, and we will enter the soprano. So we've already got the B doubled twice. So this is a bit of an irregular jump, but let's just jump down here. And yeah, we'll jump around a little bit here, and we'll see if we can get some different types of errors to appear. And finally, let's do something like that. Okay, so as I mentioned before, if we're in kind of practice mode, we could then check our answer. But let's submit here, and we'll see what sort of feedback we get. Okay, so you can see my answer here is quite colourful. Over on the right here, we obviously get a score, an indication of the voice leading and spelling errors. The rule set that is applied here again replicates the rule rubric that is applied in the actual AP Music Theory exam. So if students happen to misspell a chord, then they lose voice leading marks in and out of that chord as well. The triangle of death. So let's have a little look at what's going on here. You can see the errors are organized by bar, but rather than getting overwhelmed with what's going on here, I can actually just select an item on here to then solo it on the notation. So I can come in and see exactly what's happening there, and see where I need to try and resolve some of the issues. Unequal fifths have been picked up there, and I have an unprepared 7th in this last bar here because of my jump from the A up to the D, and also some parallel fifths there. So for students to get this immediate feedback, it's fantastic, and they can not have to wait for instructors to grade things and return that information to them. So as far as completing that learning loop, that learning cycle, a really great way to help them hopefully progress more quickly or progress at their kind of optimum learning rate. Now we won't do another question here, but again, this time we have a question in B minor. Again, using some kind of vocabulary that relates directly to the exam. Now, just before we have a look at a few of these other items, like to quickly look at, let's have a look here, just some of the two-part composition exercises as well. So these are manually assessed, so these get returned, the students' answers here get returned to the grading area in Auralia Musition, and then you can assess that and see exactly what the student's done here. So you can see here, we're told the key is G major, and we're given the phrases, and we're given Roman numerals and a bass part up until the end of bar 3 there. So as per the exam, the student can then come in, enter their parts, and then enter their bass part, and then switch to the Roman numerals here to enter whatever needs to be entered here. So I won't work all the way through this question, but I did just want to illustrate that this question format is supported in the programs, so that you can actually deliver it to your students as part of a kind of a larger exam mock-up if you choose to. And again, there's a pool of these questions, so students can repeat a task or a worksheet multiple times and get different sets of questions each time. Okay. Next up, we're going to go down to some of the exam level sight singing. And I won't punish you with my singing today, but I'd like to illustrate how these questions work. Again, they are manually assessed, but the melodies represent exactly the types of melodies students will see in the exam. So here, for example, you can see we're in a D minor, quite stepwise motion, and then up here, once again, we have a chromatic note, raised scale degree 4, which is, as you no doubt aware, is probably the most common chromatic note that occurs in the AP music theory sight singing portion of the exam. So essentially here, the student can be given a tonic note, and they simply hit record. They can set their input level, and I'll just record a few items here. All right, I was about a third out for that last little section. I was only given one attempt to record here, and I can actually hear my answer back if I choose to. And I'll just record a few items here. All right, I don't need to punish you with that again. But let's move on to the next question. You can see my timer has just about expired here on the first question, so I might just let that play out. And then we moved on to the next question here. Again, you can see this timer ticking down, 1 minute 40 and so on. You can see the instructions say, tell the student here to either transpose the melody by octave or to a different key to best suit their voice type. So this can be a really great way to deliver, again, exam-specific sight singing practice questions for your students. And then you can go into the grading area and listen to what they've done, provide feedback, and pass it back on to the student. Okay. Now, just while we're in the exam level content, a couple of other things to point out. There are loads and loads of worksheets in here that essentially break, a single topic or single elements from the exam down into a standalone worksheet. So this could be something like cadences with, identifying cadences and harmonic tones. These types of questions through to things where the student is perhaps having to do some of the multiple choice questions. Let's start off with some of the oral multiple choice questions. Great, so in here we can see down the left hand side we have our little navigator, so we can actually click around within this if we like. Again, this is kind of set up pretty much in a practice mode, but in this case the student, I'm pretty sure, doesn't get feedback after they submit their answer. You can enable that if you like, but in this particular case, I believe it's been set up with the feedback turned off. You can see here we have a timer also running on this. So again, just trying to create a bit more of kind of exam conditions. Okay, 2 replays on this, and initially just kind of scale comparison or scale ID. All right, student can select their answer, hit submit, and then they are moved on to the next item here. You can close this if you want more screen space or navigate on to wherever you like. Let's have a look at a couple more here, perhaps rhythm comparison. Which of the following is played? All right, so we can choose that. And then as we skip to some later sections in this worksheet, we can see we're dealing with some of the contextual listening questions. So these will use real audio recordings and replicating the kind of question formats you'll see in the exam. And you'll note here that these questions are grouped also so that there are, 4 or in some cases 5 questions based all around the same work. And so on. Now let's just jump to the next work just so we can have a quick listen there. We might see what other question types are in here. Great, and now we get into some of the error detection questions here. So these look a little bit like this. You'll be very familiar with this question format, and the student is essentially having to identify where the error has occurred. In measure 2, there is an error in, let's have a listen. Now, jumping ahead a little bit more, again, we have some more contextual listening, where essentially we're listening to multiple sections within an excerpt. And in the final section here, dealing with a whole range of different questions. Cadences, modulations, all sorts of content like that, scale degree ID and so on. So in addition to this, there is also a multiple choice theory worksheet. There are a whole bunch of kind of fixed question worksheets. So if you need to make sure students are getting exactly the same set of questions, you can use one of those. If you prefer to use like randomized question banks, then you can use this particular one. And again, students can do this multiple times. So in here, I'll have to do everything from key signature ID through to beaming, chord ID, part writing errors, items relating to score analysis. So in this case, looking at 6/4 chords. And in the final section here, compositional devices, where the student has to identify, in this case, where segment H has been derived from, or how it's been derived. And just multiple choice options there. So hopefully these worksheets can just provide a really easy way for students to do independent practice that is almost completely automatically assessed, just to help develop, refine their skills and get used to working within an exam context and exam environments. Now, before we jump back into the question area, I would just briefly like to point out that, as I mentioned earlier, we do have lots of other supporting worksheets that are under these other little task groups here. And these are all mapped specifically to units within the CED. So if you're working on Unit 1 with your students and you want them to do some work on major scales and major scale degrees, then you can simply assign this as a standalone worksheet to your students. Over on the right here, we can see this worksheet contains a question on scale construction, and then some basic questions on scales and scale degrees. Let's have a really quick look at this. So here we're entering half and whole steps. And in this case, feedback is turned on for these particular supporting worksheets. In this case, we're having to write a scale, a descending scale. You'll note that students can interact with the on-screen keyboard to enter their answer. They can enter their answer on the staff using the solfege controller or also a guitar controller. And we also have a new piano roll controller as well, which is great for students coming from more of a music production kind of background. If they're used to using Ableton or Pro Tools or any of those kind of DAWs, that might be a more familiar type of interface for them. Okay, let's just do a few more of these really quickly. D major descending again. C major descending. And of course, if I get any of the pictures incorrect here, then I can listen to both the correct answer versus my answer to both orally and visually compare the two. And finally, we have these kind of scale degree question types. So in this case, this is a major key. What is the scale degree? And so on. And in this case, a melody is displayed and we have to enter the scale degrees underneath the melody. So we can click in our answer and hopefully do much better than that. And then get that nice feedback and listen back to it. So there is loads to explore in there, as I mentioned, covering all those key areas. These are curated worksheets that you can choose to assign to your students or not assign. If you want your students to have a little bit more kind of free range control over how they practice these materials, you can also let them loose in the practice areas here. So under Auralia, we have all the kind of related ear training elements, and under Musician, all the related theory content. And you'll see in here that if we choose a particular topic, like say, we look at 4-part writing, all the levels are structured around the units in the CED. So again, it makes it really easy for students if they know that you're currently working on Unit 4, they can simply go into Unit 4 in the practice area here and work on some questions. It's really finely scaffolded in most of the topics. Here you can see students are dealing with all these really fundamental skills as isolated kind of levels here. And then once they actually have to start writing, we provide the 5-chord for them. So as a starting point, they begin like this, and then they kind of build upon those skills. So again, if we do something like this, and then perhaps we don't quite resolve the leading tone. As I mentioned earlier, this is where the check my answer function in practice mode becomes really useful. And I can see here, okay, so I haven't resolved my leading tone, and that's largely as a result of me having that chord spelling issue in the second chord there. So I can go great, edit my answer, and choose voice 2 there, and check my answer again. Great, everything's going well. Of course, I can click on this to play back my answer as well. And I can submit my answer. So lots and lots of questions in there like that. If we're looking at 4-part writing alone, you'll see that, as I mentioned, all these levels are really finely scaffolded. So in this level, the student is writing just 5/1 resolutions in isolation, but unlike the previous level, the 5 chord is not given. Slowly introducing chordal sevenths and then implications for unequal fifths. Sevenths there, slowly introducing inversions and approaching 7th chords, getting into some of the predominant chord functions, and then all the other vocabulary that is found in the curriculum. Use of cadential 6/4s, dealing with cross relations, and then getting into applied chords. So again, these start off from just kind of 2 chord exercises to some slightly longer ones, like so. But with the key takeaway being that I guess students get to work on really specific vocabulary in an isolated manner, get that great feedback before they move on to the next item in the course. Okay, so in here as well, lots of core fundamentals dealing with key signatures, students just having to write key signatures. Many of the topics take a very pen and paper type approach as well. So if the student starts to do things like this, that is entirely possible. We might try again, and then we get some nice feedback. Now, in the Auralia side of things, again, all the levels, all the levels are mapped to the CED, and students can practice lots of things in isolation. So interval recognition, say melodic intervals. So the student again can enter their answer on the keyboard or using any of the other controllers, or using the multiple choice. If I do get a question incorrect, I might try again, then I can play back and versus my answer. Now, accompanying all the topics as well are lessons. So students do need to review curriculum materials. They can go into Take Lesson and work their way through all sorts of goodies here, playing back examples and reviewing any of this kind of content. Now, as far as from the student perspective, they can always get a really good idea of how they're traveling under the kind of reports area here. So I can come into this top little toolbar item and see how my practice has been going across all syllabi. If I just want to see how I'm going in AP Music Theory for all time, I can see that, and if I like, I can get a breakdown per level as well. Now I can also look at how I'm traveling in tasks. So I can see that today I have attempted quite a few items. Most of them are incomplete. I can see how much time I've spent in here as well. So that's really useful for the student to be able to get a kind of broad overview of how they are going, how they're progressing. From the instructor teacher side of things, under admin, you have lots and lots of fine-grained detail about how the students are going. Under reports, you can come in and look at the information in all sorts of different ways. So perhaps if I wanted to just get an overall summary of how my student, Tim Wilson, is going, I can come in and just search for myself. select Tim Wilson, and I just want to see how I've gone this year across both programs. And yes, we'll just leave that as a default. I can hit show, and then I can see, great, this is what I've done in practice. I can see it breakdown by topic, see how much time I've spent in each topic as well, and what my kind of average scores are. I can also go into see my test results for my tasks or quizzes or worksheets, and I get a nice breakdown there. And we won't get to discussing courses today, but that can be another useful feature for delivering kind of different types of kind of result-driven work for your students. If you do need to dive in and see exactly what students have entered for particular questions within a worksheet, you can go to the admin grading area. And this is an example of where you might come in and grade some of the free response questions here. So I can simply select this, and this was my terrible singing from before, but I can essentially in here I can listen to this is the free response number 7. I can see exactly what the student entered there under the student answer, and I can add grades here, add comments, 5 out of 10 here, and add a little private comment here as well, and then I can grade that item. And then next up, we can go to my sight singing efforts here and record. I can listen back here, and you can have a count in or whatever else you want here. Just listen back and then manually grade that there as well. So lots of great ways for you to, dive deeper into your students' progress if you choose to. I hope you found today really useful, and it gives you a bit of a kind of a broad overview of the way the programs can be used in your classroom, hopefully support and engage your students, and allow you to have more time to use in the class to deal with specific problem areas, or to actually teach, as opposed to be doing that kind of drilling that can be the requirements can be so different from student to student. So if you have any further questions, please get in touch with the link I've already popped in the chat. We do have a great little community private Facebook group, which I'll pop in the chat now as well, and also a YouTube channel with lots of training videos and new content emerging there. And please, please sing out if you have any questions or queries about any of this. The trial offering essentially provides 60-day accounts, including basically 20 student accounts. So it gives you a really good chance to try out the programs in your classroom. We do host a weekly support Zoom as well on Wednesdays, 4:30 Eastern Time USA. So you can always drop in there if you have any questions along the way. And finally, thank you very much for joining us. This is the first of three webinars. We'd love to see you at some of the other webinars. In the next one, we're going to be looking more specifically at the free response questions and digging a little bit deeper into some of the question options and formats that you have available there. And the final webinar will be a bit of an exam bootcamp, where we'll actually be stepping through a bunch of the questions from the 2023 exam and looking at perhaps some tips and strategies that your students may be able to use, or that they can take away from that exam that they may be able to apply this year or potentially in the future. So students are obviously welcome to attend that. That may be really useful for them. If anyone is interested in attending that, please share this following kind of Zoom link with students, colleagues, and we hope to see you at the next webinar. Please reach out with any questions, and take care. We'll hopefully see you soon. Thanks. Bye.